This week on the podcast, we continue our October Horror Movie Festival, which I just named it that, with what I think is a modern-day classic horror movie. Stick around. Welcome back to the Kevin Talks Movies podcast, and as you probably guessed based on the title that you clicked on for this episode, you guessed it right, we're talking about Jaws again. Just kidding. We're talking about The Conjuring. So I just rewatched this movie. I've seen it probably 4 times now, and I do think it is a modern-day classic horror movie. You know, as far as... by the way, spoiler alert ahead, so if you haven't seen The Conjuring, I highly recommend going to watch it before listening to this podcast, because I'm going to ruin everything for you. And it is a great movie, and I think you should see it if you haven't seen it. If you have seen it, see it again. It's still good. I would probably put it up there in the top 3 horror movies of the 2010s. I would probably put it with, I'd say probably number 1 for the 2010 horror movies. I'd say number 1 probably goes to The Babadook. Number 2, I would give to The Conjuring. And number 3, I would probably say Get Out. 3 great movies. I think modern-day classics, all of them. And The Conjuring coming in at number 2, that's no different. So let's get into it. First off, this movie is freaking scary. It doesn't matter if you've seen it before, it will still scare you. Even though you know what's coming, it'll still scare you. And that's what makes it a good movie. Really. Because as far as horror movies go, if you know what's going to happen and it still scares you, good job to the filmmakers. That means they did a good job. Even the opening sequence was scary, you know? Like, just the freaking, like Warner Brother logos. The music was so unnerving during those that I was even scared just in the opening credits. They weren't the credits, but you know what I mean. The studio things. You know what I mean. So, every line of dialogue in this movie is an important one. This movie is so well written, and the characters are really well defined, I think, in a very subtle way, though. And they couldn't have done better with the dialogue. Perfect. And I love there's a lot of foreshadowing as well. And I just, it was great. Great stuff. It's a good job to those guys. I think they were brothers that wrote the screenplay. So, good job, whatever your names are, brothers. So the dog not wanting to go into the house, that was obviously a cliche, but it was done really well. It was still super effective, even though it's been done in 1,001 movies, but actually probably even more. But it was really well done in this movie. Loved it. Appreciated it. Couldn't get enough of it. Could watch a whole movie of the dog not wanting to go in the house. Just kidding. That's the whole movie. The plot is this dog does not want to go in the house. The twist is the dog eventually goes in the house. Think I could sell that screenplay? Probably not. The dog in this movie dies. Sorry. Spoiler. I told you, spoiler alert. What are you doing? If you haven't seen... I warned you. Spoiler alert. The dog dies. Just like in Marley and Me, except much more gruesome. The movie had great build-up overall. So part of the great thing about the scares in this movie is that they're all so well built up. This movie is great. They did great build-up, great scares, a great amount of scares, not too many. And not really any jump scares per se, which, again, I appreciate. There are a few false jump scares, where like you're expecting something to jump out, but then instead it's just like the kid, which isn't scary, but there was a couple of those, but I don't mind those so much because they were well done. The cinematography was awesome. Everything about it was on point. The angles, the cant shots, gotta love a good cant shot. The camera movement, if you're into that sort of thing, the cinematography in this movie was great, as well as the music. The music, the cinematography, the sound design, the acting, all of those were really good. And I gotta say, about the acting, especially by the kids, they surprised me, particularly the, I don't remember the character's name, but the one daughter who she was sitting up in her bed late at night, and she saw like a demon or something. I don't know, because we never saw it, but she saw it. And her sister couldn't see it either. And her acting alone really sold it. She was so scared. Like, she seemed so scared. Like, I really believed her performance. And it was making me scared. I couldn't even see what she was seeing, but her reaction to it was golden. Made me scared of whatever she was seeing. Great, great acting, especially child acting. Very, very impressed with that girl, whatever her name is. She should be in more stuff. The 3-clap thing was great. Okay, that game they play with the 3 claps. First clap, pop, pop. Second clap, pop, pop. Third clap. That thing was great because it was so subtle at the beginning. It started off seeming super innocent, right? And then progressively, the more you see it in the movie, I think you see it 3 times in the movie. The second time, it's not so innocent, and it seems just a little bit creepier. And you're kind of like, what is going on, What is going to be happening with this 3-clap game here? And then, by the third time around, and you actually see the demon's hands come out of the darkness and clap, that was crazy. That was awesome. Probably one of the most memorable things about the whole movie. And it was, if I recall correctly, when this movie was in theaters, I remember that being in the trailer. And that kind of upsets me that probably the most memorable moment of the movie was in the trailer. It was a really good scare, but, I mean, don't put it in the preview, Jeez. Although you guys can make a good movie, your preview department, although probably good, because if you're putting the most scary thing in the trailer, that means people are going to go see the movie, which is your ultimate objective as the people, because it's a business, But then it kind of might ruin that scare when you see it in the actual movie. But good thing is, the trailer, it doesn't matter but now, because the movie's old by this point. Well, not old, but you know what I mean. A few years old. And anyway, so the 3-clap thing is effective again, which is awesome. And the piano, oh my gosh, that out-of-tune piano in the basement. So scary. So when the wife, or was it the husband? Okay. Anyway, at the beginning when they first move in, somebody plays like 3 notes on the piano, and they're like, oh, it's just a piano, whatever. But then later on in the movie, when they hear it at night, and they hear the piano coming from the basement, that was crazy. Oh my God, that was so scary. That was so scary. It was like the same 3 notes that they played early on in the movie too, which was a great callback. It was awesome. Loved it. Great movie. Overall, I think this movie deserves deserves a 9 out of 10. I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10 because I think it's great. I think it's a modern day classic. There's not much they could have done better, in my opinion. Only thing is, it kind of ran a little slow at times, which was to build up tension, and they did a good job of building up tension, but it was just maybe a teeny tiny bit too slow at times. So for that reason, 9 out of 10. But still really good. Modern day classic. The Conjuring. If you haven't seen it, check it out. Highly recommend it. And let's go into some behind the scenes facts.
Fact me, fact you.
All right, so now that I've given my rating of it, let's see what Google says. My voice cracked. I'm sorry. That was just a little embarrassing. But, so IMDb gives it a 7.5 out of 10. Ooh, man, that's it? Really? Ooh, Rotten Tomatoes, 86%. That's more like it. Metacritic, 68%. Ooh. Google users, 91% of Google users like this movie, so Google gives it a 91. That's about what I gave it. I gave it a 90%. IMDb and Metacritic, come on, man. You got to step it up. Step it up. So apparently this movie, I don't know what that was. Apparently this movie made $319.5 million at the box office. If you ask me, that's pretty good taking. This was in 2013, by the way. I love how this movie... I also love how this movie was based in the 70s. That was cool, too. So, some things you didn't know about this movie. Fact me, fact you. That was a live version. Not a pre-recorded version, could you tell? Didn't have all the reverb on it. Not to draw your attention to that. But... apparently, this is one of the highest-grossing horror movies of all time. The Conjuring was made on a relatively modest budget of $20 million, but went on to recoup that figure back nearly 16 times over to become one of the most profitable scary movies of all time. It was also the first horror movie since 2004's Van Helsing to gross over $300 million worldwide, and the fifth most successful supernatural tale in domestic history. But its most impressive feat is the fact that it is now firmly placed inside the top 10 highest grossing horror movies ever. Yeah, so indeed, finishing ahead of much starrier and more heavily promoted affairs such as Shutter Island. Ooh, Shutter Island was good too. The Silence of the Lambs and What Lies Beneath. The Conjuring sits at number 7 in the all-time rankings as of 2016. The movie Seven with $327 million, Hannibal with $352 million, and we're also within touching distance, just ahead of them with Signs with $408 million. I need to rewatch that, by the way. The Exorcist, $441 million, which you could tell there was some Exorcist influence in this movie, but I'll get to that later, or will I? Jaws, $471 million, and The Sixth Sense, $673 million, making up the top 4. So The Conjuring is in good company as far as horror movies go, which is cool. The film has apparently been in the works for 20 years. The Conjuring couldn't exactly be described as an overnight success. In fact, the idea for the film initially emerged 20 years previously when the film producer Tony DeRosa Grund was playing a tape of Lorraine's original interview with Carolyn Perrin by her husband, Ed. They attempted to get the project off the ground for the next 14 years to no avail, although he very nearly landed a deal with the production company responsible for The Haunting in Connecticut. The film's lengthy gestation period finally looked to be coming out of an end in mid-2009 when it became the subject of the 6th studio bidding war. But DeRosa and successful bidders, Summit Entertainment, failed to agree on the terms of the contract. The Conjuring went into limbo once again, much to DeRosa Grund's relief. I don't know how to say that guy's name. I'm just guessing. The movie finally started to become a reality a few months later, in the Evergreen Media Group made a deal with New Line Cinema. It originally had a different name. The Conjuring was originally going to be called the Untitled Warrenfield Project. You be the judge. Is The Conjuring a better name? I think so. Because that's a mouthful. You try to... Yeah, what movie are you going to go see today? Yeah, we're just going to the theaters and we're just going to see the Untitled Warrenfield Project. I don't know about that. Oh, apparently the real Lorraine Warren has a cameo in the movie. Lorraine Warren's investment in the film also extends far beyond her research with the Hayes brothers, who wrote the movie, by the way. But she was indeed, as well as clairvoyant, light trance medium and paranormal investigator, Lorraine can also add actress to her resume, as she appeared in The Conjuring as the older woman in the front row of the classroom in which Carolyn is listening to Warren's presentation. However, it is not Warren's first IMDb credit. In 1982, she served as a demonology advisor in some sort of horror movie called Amityville 2, The Possession. But it's cool that the real lady's actually in the movie. I like that. I like that a lot. The current owners of the real house in the film sued the producers. That's interesting. Yeah, so The Conjuring put the home back onto the map, and the couple suddenly found themselves living in a tourist attraction. Because of that, I guess they sued, and the couple who bought the property in 1987, 16 years after the events in the movie took place, have also named the individual trespassers and 500 interlopers referenced as John and Jane does in the lawsuit, which argues... Okay, but they don't tell me, like, if they won the lawsuit or whatever. I assume they probably did, but, like, you know. Although that's got to be annoying, having people come into your house all the time. But it's also got to be annoying to live in a haunted house. So, which one's worse? You tell me. You be the judge. Screenings in the Philippines of this movie were blessed by priests. Yep, you heard it here first. Not really first, but you heard it here. Screenings in the Philippines were blessed by priests for this movie. And not only this movie, but also The Exorcist, The Blair Witch Project, and, of course, The Conjuring. Producers wanted a PG-13 rating, apparently. I like it as an R movie. It was good as is. I wouldn't really change it. Yeah, so that's about it. That's about it that this article's got for me, which means that's about it that I've got for you, because I only get what I get from articles, and you only get what you get from me. So if I only get what I get from articles, and you only get what you get from me, that means you only get what I get from articles. So that's what you get, and that's my little rap for the day. And speaking of rap, let's wrap it up. If you want to follow the Instagram, if you want to follow the podcast on Instagram, our handle is at Kevin Talks Movies. If you want to email us any comments, questions, suggestions, concerns, go ahead and email us. KevinTalksMoviesPodcast@gmail.com. Comments, questions, concerns, suggestions. You can suggest a movie. Go ahead. For a full catalog of the show, because they're not all available on iTunes, you can go to YouTube and find Kevin Talks Movies on YouTube, and there's a full catalog from episode 1 of The Terminator 2 up until currently episode 9, The Conjuring, and there will be more later on as well. But iTunes will get newer episodes, so if you subscribe now, you'll get them on iTunes. But if you want to go back in history and re-listen to a previous podcast, YouTube's the place to go. So, that is it for this week. I will see you next week with Hopefully I'll be able to speak next week. That would be great. So, I will see you next week, next Monday, for another horror movie. I think it's going to be The Shining, which is a great movie. So, if you haven't seen The Shining, go ahead and take this moment to go see it now, or rewatch it. So when we discuss it next time, you'll be right up there with me with just having seen it. So I'm Kevin. Thanks for talking movies with me. I'll see you next week. Thanks.